Well, greetings, friends. I'm back. Nice to see you. I'm probably a little bit rusty because I haven't been doing talk radio for over a year now. I have done a few live streams, which I've enjoyed doing with you on my locals page, which is the only place on social media that I'm engaging with people these days. And so I wanted to explain a couple of things to you about why I decided to relaunch the Danielle Smith Show, why I did it on Western Standard, and what I hope to be able to accomplish here. So you are more than welcome to send me emails and texts and just engage with me throughout the course of our show today. If I have time, I will answer some of the questions that you have. A few of them have come in on locals, which is if those of you who want to follow me there, it's daniellesmith.locals.com. What I love about the medium, and this goes to as well why I did leave some of those other social media mediums, is that it seems to me it's a lot more respectful. This is the thing I always tried to bring to my show, is that I truly believe that we can have a respectful conversation, that you can agree, you can listen to people who have different viewpoints and disagree with them, but you don't have to, it doesn't have to be hateful. It doesn't have to be angry. So I don't like the tone that I have seen emerge over the last year and a half. And that's part of the reason why I decided to see if I might be able to inject a new tone. I know that you may be surprised by that because simultaneously I've announced that I'm going back into politics. So let me see if I can deal with this in sequence. Part of what we're going to do with this show is I'm going to have on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm going to deal with top issues of the day, daily news stories. And so I have way more material than I could possibly get to today, but I do want to get your feedback. So Danielle at daniellesmith.ca is the way to email me at any time if you want me to address something in the next show. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm just borrowing from Dave Rubin, who I have enjoyed listening to and watching for many, many years now. He is a gay registered Democrat from California, recently moved to Florida for freedom, and he has left the left and is now one of these voices of reason. And he left over wokeism, and he does an awful lot of conversation about that. And so I joined his platform on Locals, and Locals got purchased by Rumble. So Rumble is the alternative YouTube. So I haven't got a profile set up there, but I will. In any case, you can send me topics and we will address those throughout the course of the next number of days. But what Dave Rubin would do is he does these little quick hits, little 30-minute segments where he deals with 3 issues of the day. I will attempt to do that. And then on Saturdays, we're going to have a long form interview. My first one, it may surprise you, but maybe it shouldn't. My first one is with Gord Tulk, and Gord Tulk runs a little group in Red Deer called Libertas. But more importantly, Gord Tulk planted the seed with me all the way back in probably 2010 about how to reform our healthcare system. And I want you to hear from him directly because he has got this brilliant idea that begins with health spending accounts. As you know, I'm a huge champion and fan of health spending accounts. So that is going to be on Saturday. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you get me and only me for 30 minutes. Saturday, we're going to do a long form interview. We'll see how that goes. Like maybe there'll be opportunities throughout the course of the week that I'll want to interview a newsmaker. And if there's a particular thought leader or newsmaker that you want to hear from, I like those long form interviews. And so I will take your suggestions on that as well. But before I get to the issue today, because I wrote about the Alberta First initiative in my newsletter this weekend, and I want to map out for you how I think we can assert ourselves within Confederation and get independence from Ottawa and develop our resources and have autonomy and have enough wealth to be able to pay for all of our social programs and not feel like we have to go begging to Ottawa every single time we want something done. It was a brilliant idea that was given to me by the organizers of the Canadian Blockchain Consortium. They asked me months ago if I would moderate their conference this week on April 20th and 21st. And I said yes. And then I left my last job and got into politics. And I said, do you still want me? And they said yes. So I will be there. I know Michelle Rempel is doing a video for introduction. She's getting quite keen on the cryptocurrency space. I hope Pierre Poilievre also puts in a video, quite frankly, because he has also said that Canada should be the blockchain capital of the world. And I think Alberta should be the center of that. And I'll tell you why in just a couple of minutes. Doug Schweitzer is going to be there, the economy and jobs minister, as well well as Nathan Glubish, who is the Service Alberta minister. So lots of interest in blockchain and what it means. And so I know that many of you may have got glassy-eyed when I talked about Bitcoin and blockchain in the past, but I am hoping I can connect some dots for you so that you can see why it is so fundamentally important to our future prosperity that we embrace this new technology, and why conservatives can be the leaders on that. So let me talk to you a little more about that. But before I get into that main topic, I want to address two issues that always come up. It doesn't seem to matter where I go. I am asked the questions, why did I leave talk radio? And why did I leave the wild rose? So I may as well just deal with those. Some of you will, this will be repeat information for you, but let me tell you anyway. So why did I leave talk radio? It's not because people were mean to me. I can handle people being mean to me. I really can. The reason I left talk radio is I felt that there were two things going on. That in this new woke world that we find ourselves in, with woke capitalism and stakeholder capitalism, there are a whole ton of areas that you're now no longer able to talk about. Otherwise, you can risk not only deplatforming, but reputational ruin and destruction. And I felt like it was a little too perilous to be on a daily show doing 3.5 hours per day, where you kind of have to deal with the issues as they come up. Because, you know, from time to time, I like to interview guests who take an alternative perspective. Because to me, that's the only way that you can learn in life, is you got to listen to people who disagree with you. But that, I thought, would put me in a perilous situation of facing a complete cancellation. And when I started seeing some of the progressives getting canceled, like Wendy Mesley at CBC and Jessica Mulrooney, and even like Brian Jesperson, I don't know if he took a couple of weeks off, but man alive, did he ever get blasted on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, because I guess it was perceived that he didn't defend one of his producers strongly enough on the air. But come on, dudes, like we've got to be able to allow for people to have reasonable discussions, reasonable disagreements without jumping down their throats. So I'm hoping I can bring a little bit of that in this medium. The other reason that I was concerned about the direction mainstream media has taken, and I've mentioned this to folks who are in mainstream media, is I feel like they've just taken way too much direction from the social media outlets, like Jack Dorsey at Twitter, and Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook, and Sundar Pichai at Alphabet, which is the parent company of Google and YouTube. They don't have journalism degrees, so they shouldn't be dictating what it is that we decide to talk about. And so there have been alternative platforms that have now cropped up in the last year and a half. I've been delighted to see Western Standard, and I'll talk more about them, True North, Rebel Media does some good work. But also on the left, you've got the Tyee, you've got Canada Lens. Like, I try to read and watch as broadly as possible. And so I'm not going to do anything that is outside the mainstream, because I'm a mainstream person. But I think that the mainstreamed conversation has become too narrowed because of the influence of those three big tech giants. I still don't know all the reasons behind that, but I'm hoping that we can have a more robust and more fulsome conversation on a greater range of issues. And that's part of my concern. The other concern I have, and I wasn't as concerned about this before, if you want the truth, when I was in the mainstream, is that this bill coming through that would regulate the internet in the same way that the radio and broadcast television is regulated through the CRTC. I am now gravely concerned about that, because what it seems to me happened during the last 2 years of COVID is that there's this, I don't know if it's a convention or if it's just the bullying tactics that happen with the CRTC. I think what happened is that mainstream broadcasters in radio and television were basically told that their licenses would be at risk if they didn't toe the party line, toe the government line on a whole range of issues. And I think that is part of the reason why we haven't had a fulsome discussion about COVID. And it's not just me saying that. I'll see if I can dig up the interview I saw recently with the head of BBC. He said that that's exactly what happened in Britain as well, is that they were basically told you can't put anything on your airwaves that contradict the official government line. Otherwise, it will be called misinformation, and you may not get your licenses renewed. So if they create that same environment for news outlets like Western Standard or True North or others, that's going to create the same, I think, lack of full information and free speech. So I hope that doesn't happen, but I'm going to pay much more attention to that bill as it winds its way through. So that is a reason why I left the talk radio airwaves. Now I am back on the talk airwaves, but in a bit of a different format. So we'll see if I can continue on without being canceled. We live in hope. The other question I often get asked is, why did I leave Wild Rose? There's so many reasons. But the main thing that I sort of internalized is this: it didn't matter to the reasons why I left. What matters is people are still very angry with me for how I left, and rightly so, because let's face it, I was elected to be the leader of the official opposition. And I took that role very seriously. I was a very strong opposition leader when Ed Stelmach was premier, pointing out the things in the direction I think he was going wrong, particularly on the new royalty framework. And in the end, it turned out that we were quite correct, because when Alison Redford got in, she very quickly changed the new royalty framework. So we had some successes there. But then, of course, Alison Redford had all kinds of issues of questionable decision-making around the use of taxpayer dollars. And we had to raise those issues. And then ultimately, she was replaced by her caucus as well. So when Jim came back, I think you expected me to do the same thing, that I was supposed to hold him to account as official opposition leader, and that I was supposed to make him prove to us that he was going to be different, because ultimately he wasn't able to prove to us that he was different. The coalition blew apart, and it took Brian Jean and Jason Kenney to try to heal the movement and bring it back together again. So I think now a couple of things that I would recognize out of what happened during my Wild Rose days. One is that the grassroots members of a party are the ones who determine who their leaders should be and the direction the party should go. Absolutely, 100%. No matter how much of a role I had in building up the Wild Rose was built by its grassroots members. And I just would make you mindful of that, because no leader has the ability to say, I built this party, therefore I can take it out again. And that includes the present leader as well. It is ultimately up to members to decide if they believe that leader can help them go into the next election, is going to be consistent with the values that the members want to espouse, and is electable. That's going to be a decision on May the 18th. I will try not to delve into that too much. I might delve into it just a teensy bit. So the other thing that I would say is that we should now realize that Alberta has changed fairly substantially, that it is no longer the type of province where we can just slap a conservative label on a party and expect that it's going to win. It's also a province where we now have a unified left-wing vote behind Rachel Notley. It's quite remarkable what she's been able to do, if you want the truth, to go from being premier to opposition leader, stay in that position, and now live to fight another day to contest it. And I don't see a replacement for her. She seems to have caucus solidarity behind her. She hasn't lost any ground since the last election. She's still been polling in the 35 to 40% range. So imagine what happens. So you've got a consolidated progressive movement under Rachel Notley. And if you end up seeing the UCP blast apart to smithereens, so that you've got a Brian Jean-led party, and a Paul Heyman-led Wild Rose, and a Todd Loewen-led Conservative Party, and a Drew Barnes-led Rural Party. If you end up with all of those factors, I just think that is going to be a recipe for a vote split and an NDP government. So this is part of the reason why I've decided to enter back into politics by seeking the Livingston-MacLeod nomination for the UCP. There's a few things. I have to wonder how different life would have been. You always sort of have a question of the path not taken. So the path not taken for me was that I had considered getting into politics in 2006 when my MLA, the PC, Richard Magnus, stepped down in the riding of the time it was Calgary North Hill, and it became Calgary Klein. That's the riding currently represented by Jeremy Nixon. I had considered doing that, and then I got into business advocacy instead. And Rob Anderson, bless his heart, he initially was trying to convince me to join the PCs and back Ted Morton, and that he felt we would be better off trying to change the party from within. I, of course, went in a different direction, and the rest is history. Now, we can change the UCP from within. That's what I have since learned as well, is that the Conservative Party is very different depending on who the leader is, depending on the culture and character of the party, depending on the autonomy of its grassroots members and its grassroots and local MLAs. And so it seems to me that the UCP is the right vehicle. I went to the AGM back in November of last year. And I saw all my old friends from my PC days and all my old friends from the Wild Rose days debating together at the mics. And it seemed to me that the merger of the two parties has been successful. The direction that it has been taken in the last couple of years, though not all bad, has created this division. So if I can do my part to try to keep the movement together and solidify the vote in my area down in Livingston McLeod, then that's what I'm going to try to do. So that's part of the reason why I want to return to politics, and I am prepared to just be a regular old MLA because I loved being a regular old MLA. There's a few things that I just want to put on the table, because this to me would allow for any political leader to go very far in politics and keep caucus solidarity. One of the things I did appreciate about Jim Prentice, rest his soul, was that when we were trying to prepare for my transition into the new role, the thing he said is, what are the three things that are most important in your constituency? And I've named three things. We had a High River a dry dam project that was very similar to this over-constructed dry dam project being proposed for the Springbank area to protect Calgary. It was put forward by Deltaris. No one liked it. And so we went and did a little helicopter tour of the area, and Jim said, okay, we're not going to do that. And we did something else instead. And our mayor, Craig Snodgrass, along with the council in High River, works like you wouldn't believe over the last 8 years. Now, High River's 100% protected. We've got everything done because we got that kind of buy-in. That's what I think was missing, unfortunately, in Calgary, is that if you could get 100% buy-in on an issue, Calgary would be protected now too. So that was one thing. The other thing was the disaster recovery program. I don't know if you truly appreciate how terrible the disaster recovery program was. I remember when they finally figured out, this was the process where, because a lot of the water flood damage was not covered by insurance, it had to be covered by a government program. And so what would happen, though, is that you'd put in your application, and then things would disappear, and there was no case management, and different people would get back to you. What in the world was going on? Well, when they finally did the analysis, they found out what was happening is that something would arrive at a person's inbox, be typed into the computer, they'd press print, and then it would go to another person's inbox. There was like 51 process steps to get a file through to completion. And so again, that's another one that Jim managed to fix. He met the bureaucrats and he said, look, do this like in a normal insurance program. Give people 75% of what the estimated adjustment value is. Make them give the receipts afterwards, and let's get on with it. So that was important. The third one was the Okotoks water line. And sorry, my friends in Okotoks, wasn't able to get that one for you. But that is the absolutely essential role of an MLA, is to go out, identify the issues that are in their area, bring them to caucus, have a discussion with the cabinet minister. If it's important enough, elevate it to the premier. We've got to flip the decision-making process on its head. And I hope I am able to do that because, as you know, I have a little bit of experience getting my voice heard. And the other part, too, is when I look at the United States, two of the elected representatives that I admire the most, Rand Paul and Jim Jordan, are just two guys who want to do the best job that they can being an elected representative. So we'll see whether or not I have some success on that. Now, of course, once we're in the RIP period, I got to leave the airwaves. And the same thing for the News Forum. They said that Dean Allison is an elected MP who does a show on the News Forum. That's the other televised show that I'm on. So that's sort of the rules here, that you can't be actively campaigning while you're doing this kind of job. So I promise you, I just wanted to give you the context. I'm not going to turn this into a platform for my campaign. What I will turn it into a platform, though, is the things that I like to write about and talk about. And more recently, this weekend, I did my newsletter on what I'm calling the Alberta First initiative. I think it's important for us to talk about this because it connects with a few of the other things that we've been discussing. We've been discussing what is going wrong in the province. And I think, unfortunately, the premier has misdiagnosed it a little bit. He seems to think that the only concerns that people have are related to his COVID response. And I would have to tell you that that's a portion of it. Absolutely. But the bigger portion is, when are we going to finally put Alberta's interests first? The hits keep coming. And when you look at what happened 10 days ago with Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault approving an offshore oil project in Newfoundland and Labrador, and then writing a letter to Suncor saying, sorry, I don't think that your oil sands project is going to fall within our emissions cap, even though Suncor is part of a group of 5 companies called the Pathways Project that have committed to being net zero by 2050. And the way they want to do it is by building a carbon dioxide trunk line and trucking down their CO2 to a site in Cold Lake, where it can either be buried in our deep caverns, because we've got a ton of pore space for burying CO2, or create a hub where that CO2 can be turned into useful products. And you wouldn't believe, if you have watched me on the last podcast I've been doing over the last year and a half, I have been spending a ton of time on how Alberta can get to net zero and how we can be net zero faster than anyone else. And one of the things that is so exciting about it is all the carbon technology that is developing to allow us to take CO2 and turn it into carbon nanofiber, which is going to be a replacement for steel, a highly durable construction material, turn it into cement so that we can create a more durable concrete, turn it into industrial minerals. Right now, they're using it to make soap, but there's all kinds of products that you can make once you've turned it into mineralized form. You can turn it back into polyethylenes, so you can turn it into a circular economy approach to plastics. You can turn it into ethylene, which is alcohol. There's even a company called Airco, which takes a pure stream of CO2 and turns it into vodka. So the pathway forward on being able to develop these kinds of products is limitless. Suncor's committed to it, as are the other partners in the Pathways Project. So why in the world would our environment minister say arbitrarily, I'm sorry, this isn't going to allow us to meet our international goals? Is hokum. So we keep, as I say, the hits, they keep on coming. And so this is part of the reason why we just need to put the country on notice that we're not going to do it this way anymore, that we're going to put Alberta first, and that there is a strategy for us to do that. Now, I have to connect this. This is a lot to try to take in on one day. Maybe I'm trying to be overly ambitious, but because I am doing the blockchain conference this week, my brain is going to explode, I know, with all the things that I'm going to learn on Wednesday and Thursday. So I want to give you a little bit of a piece of where I think this whole conversation about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin is going, and the seed that was planted with me, with the organizers from the Canadian Blockchain Consortium, about how Alberta can leverage this over and take responsibility over our own development of our own resources, but also become the center of cryptocurrency, of blockchain, and of blockchain mining. And it's going to be, I think, to me, this is absolutely the answer. But to get there from here, because everyone has a different level of knowledge, I think I need to play for you a portion of a video that was played at the Bitcoin 2022 conference a couple of weeks ago. And it was Peter Thiel. Now, Peter Thiel, if I'm saying his name right, was the founder of PayPal. And what he wanted to do was to create an alternative system for doing transactions, an alternative currency. It's funny to hear him talk in this full video, and I will post the link to the full video so that you can watch it, because there's a number of different videos that come out of this conference that you'll be interested in. But one of the things that I think is important is that he realized all the way back in 1999 this new world that would be developing. We have a very strange relationship with money. And part of what I commented on in my newsletter this weekend, you can sign up, by the way, for my newsletter at daniellesmith.ca so you can receive it each week. One of the things that I commented on is, if you look at our Constitution, the federal government is obsessed with currency and controlling money and central banking. And yet at the same time, we keep getting told that the love of money is the root of all evil and all of these terrible adages. So we've got this strange relationship with money. Whereas if you go into the Bitcoin and blockchain world and even hear what Jordan Peterson has to say about it, money is really just an expression of our life's work effort put into productive form to develop value for somebody else. It's wealth creation at its very root. We used to have a barter system. So if you had 3 goats, you'd be able to trade them for a cow. But as we got more and more specialized and diversified, it didn't make much sense for us to continue that kind of bartering system. And so we developed gold and silver. But, walking around with gold bars and silver ingots is not very convenient. So then we ended up with a ruler who would put aside some gold and silver and issue paper that was legal tender so that it became more convenient for us to be able to transact business with each other. They blew apart the gold standard in the 1970s. I know that many, many people still think that our currency is backed by something. It isn't. It's backed by nothing. It's backed by government promises. And as we've seen, the government is very, very irresponsible, especially in the last 2 years, about how they have been charged with that task. The kind of money printing that we've seen is extraordinary. And I've known from the time of my economics degree with Dr. Frank Atkins teaching me Econ 203 that you cannot keep on printing money, having too much money chasing around after too few goods without it leading to inflation. It's obvious that was going to happen. That's the situation we find ourselves in. So what do? Do you just fall victim and just sort of hope that some country is going to emerge with a sound monetary policy? The Americans have been going down exactly the same path, as has Europe. What are you supposed to do? Do we all have to take Russian rubles or Chinese yuan? Well, that's not an option either. So what is it that is emerging as the future option? And it's Bitcoin. I know it's crazy to say that because it didn't even really exist more than a decade ago. The very first Bitcoin purchase was 10,000 coins used to buy 2 pizzas at Papa John's. So that was $40. Now, if you do the math on what 10,000 Bitcoins are worth today, that was like a $95 million pizza. But this is, I guess, what has happened is that now that Bitcoin is close to $1 trillion market cap, it's one of those types of commodities that is now here to stay. What's going to happen in the future? I guess that remains to be seen. But I think that this is part of the reason why you hear politicians like Michelle Rempel and Pierre Poilievre and even our own provincial ministers talking about it, is that it's now too big to be ignored. I just want to play for you this video because I think a lot of you are very nervous about digital technologies. You're nervous about digital ID. You're nervous about digital currencies. And I want to try to get your framework to change a little bit on this, because there are 2 ways that you can look at digital currencies. One is a digital currency that is controlled by a central banker, which is directed by a central government. And as Jordan Peterson has pointed out, yes, that's something that we should be very concerned about, because if you have that kind of currency where the only way of transacting goods is to use the Bank of Canada denominated Canadian currency, which can be tracked and used to nudge you in certain directions, and where you've given a power to a central authority to turn on and off your bank accounts, as we've seen is possible in the last couple of months, then you have every reason to be concerned about that. But there's also the other option, which is what Bitcoin provides, which is decentralized currency. And I don't think you're going to be able to eat all this up in one bite, but I want you to try to understand that we're not going back to a world where we're going to be bartering goats for cows. It's not practical. We're not going back to a world of a gold standard or a silver standard either, because we now are at a point where the entire market for gold and silver is only a fraction of what the stock market is. And so there's just not going to be that kind of adjustment, I don't think. I don't think you're going to end up seeing central banks all of a sudden decide to start up buying gold and silver in North America or Europe. And so what is the alternative? Now, I want you to hear what Peter Thiel had to say back in 1999, because, man, this guy's a visionary. He predicted where we would be today. And so I want you to hear with his own words how he opened up his presentation at the Bitcoin 2022 conference. Now, This is where Laura comes in, who is working busily behind the scenes to get a video up. And I'm waiting to see if she does. Technical difficulties, right? Please stand by. I think she's got it here. So this
from these physical dollars to electronic dollars. I think the basic technology is going to take place on the internet. I think the specific platform in the emerging world is going to be on a cell phone platform. If you look at the numbers, there are about 360 million, about 150 million online desktop-based accounts today. That number is projected
to
about 350 million in the next 5 years. However, with respect to cell phones, internet-enabled cell phones, they're just getting rolled out right now. They already have some significant penetration in Japan, in Finland, in Sweden. They're getting rolled out in Western Europe, the US next year. The numbers are projected to grow from about 10 million internet-enabled cell phones today to about 1 billion in 5 years. In 5 years from now, everybody who is a member of the middle class in the emerging world and in the developed world will have an internet-enabled cell phone. And this sort of a in China, the number is projected to go to something like 300 million cell phones, most of which will be internet-enabled. These people will have access to their bank accounts, and it will be very easy for them to move money into an account in a safe jurisdiction where the banks are not politically controlled, and they will basically be able to completely dollarize the economy. There will be no need to have any rubles or renminbi, and it will be non-traceable. No matter how illegal the Chinese Communist government says it is to hold US dollars, you will have a password on your cell phone, and the only way to stop this process would be literally to shut down the telecommunications network. And that's the kind of choice governments like China, India, some of these other countries are going to face. They will either have to shut down the telecommunications network and make it illegal for you to own a cell phone, or they will have to basically give up the kind of monetary sovereignty they've had and the enormous power that they've been able to wield as a result of this kind of sovereignty over the last many, many years.
Isn't that remarkable? So he was predicting that over 20 years ago. And that is essentially what we have right now. I mean, we've all gotten used to using our cell phones to pay. We put our credit cards on there, or our access to our bank account, or use Apple Pay. And then you go to a vendor, swipe it, and it's done. So the infrastructure is already there, but we're still using the traditional currencies. What Bitcoin does is it allows for you to transact in an alternative currency that is, as he mentioned, not controlled by a central bank, that is untraceable, that you essentially hold your bank account on your phone, which is a little bit different than how we access all of those other payment mechanisms. Now, I knew we were going to run out of time for today. I think I'll give you guys some homework. And here's the homework I'm going to assign for you. I would love for you to go and check out some of these Bitcoin 2022 conference videos. So first of all, the keynote address by Peter Thiel, because that will give you a framework for how we should be thinking about this approach and this move to cryptocurrency, and bracing it not necessarily as an alternative, but as an augmentation to what we are already doing. And it creates a competitive market, and which will put some discipline on our central banks again, put some discipline on our government to have sound monetary policy. So I need you to watch that. I also need you to watch Jordan Peterson. He does a keynote fireside chat also at the Bitcoin 2022 conference. And I'll see if I can pull a little bit out from him next time around, because one of the things that he observes, he talks about how important it is for us to have that kind of autonomy over our own money, so that it can't be deflated or inflated the way the government is doing, and we can't be not locked out of our wealth the way we've now seen that central banks are allowed to do. So he talks about that. But one of the things that got him interested in cryptocurrency is he looked at all of the characters that are lined up against it and saying that it is irrelevant, or that it is a scam, or that it is, and there's all, you just see the whole gamut of criticisms for it. And he said, you know what, if those guys are opposed to it, that's probably a sign that I should be paying closer attention to this. So watch what Jordan Peterson has to say about it as well. This is the opening step of where we're going to go this week, because there's a whole strategy that we can use in Alberta for how we could embrace cryptocurrency, embrace Bitcoin, embrace the Bitcoin mining sector, and really open our doors to have Bitcoin mining taking place here, which gives us the ability to create a new market, develop our natural gas resources, as well as have new export products. So I'm going to wrap that up in a bow for you, but I'm not going to do it today. If you want to, if you want to see a copy of my newsletter, maybe you should just sign up for it, because once you've signed up, I tell you how to access it on my website. I'm not really all that interested in having it shoot out to the entire world, because as I've told you, the social media environment these days is kind of hostile to I think a full and fair discussion of ideas. And so I just prefer for people to sign up to my newsletter who actually care what I have to say, because this is how free speech should work. I tell you what I think, and then you are free to unsubscribe if you don't like what I have to say. But that's it for me for today. I see that I have a huge number of posts that have come in. Sorry I wasn't able to get to those today. It's just setting the framework for a much broader discussion. I should finish by thanking Derek Fildebrand for giving me this opportunity. Derek, which is sort of an interesting historical footnote, let me just put on this. If you go into the offices of the Western Standard, you will see on the wall that there is an archive of old news magazines in print form. And that is because Ezra Levant and my ex-husband, Sean McKinsley, started Western Standard in the print form all those years ago. And I kept every single copy because it was a delight to see it. And I just didn't have the heart to throw it away. And so when Derek restarted Western Standard, I said, this is the home for it. So you can see the archive. And I told him we've got to find a way to ink out my name because it was printed on the face of that. So you have to understand what the history is there too. And Derek Fildebrand as well. He launched a recall campaign for me back in the day when he was so upset with me for leaving the Wild Rose and joining Jim Prentice's team. And this is just a proof positive that time heals all wounds, and conservatives, you know what, got a lot more that unites us than divides us. And we got to talk more about those things that unite us. That's it for me for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. It's Danielle Smith. This has been the Danielle Smith Show. We will be back at this again on Wednesday at 9 a.m. Talk to you then.